everybody. I'm out here in the shop and I'm working on this Kubota KX 080 and I'm doing a little service work. This thing was just itching to have a service done, and I'm far from complete, but last night I was out here for a bit. Well, yesterday I was out here for a few hours, and I changed some filters. We're going to continue working on this thing this morning, and I've been busy cleaning this thing up steady. I put a new primary and secondary air filter in there, and last night brand new fuel filter in there too, just a canister style fuel filter right here. That's new. And took some time too in here. Let me get the light on. Right there. Put a new element inside that fuel water separator right there. So that's new. Oh yeah, I forgot right there. Right there is your return line hydraulic oil filter right there. And that's that canister style there is brand new too. I put that on. So far, I think I've done 5 filters so far in this machine. And I got another one to do that's very hard to get at. And you may or may not see it right inside there, straight ahead of the camera. That is your pilot pressure filter for your pilot hydraulics right there. And that has to be taken out. And I don't think it's one that you can screen. It's actually a filter, and I believe I have it. I got all the filters for this machine when I bought it, because really it's an unknown to me. I have no idea how well these guys service this machine, and luckily it's only got 1,600 hours on it, but I don't know how much dedication they put into maintenance on this machine, so I can't really say. So I got to go through and do it all. But I can tell you, look at that counterweight. So they were, let's just face it, pretty careless operators. When you get a lot of scuffing on the rear counterweight of your machine, even though it's not zero tail swing, it's tight tail swing, you know what? You got to have your eyes open. And when you see this thing's ground and the body fills pulled right off of this casting, you know that those guys were rather reckless. I mean, it's just the way it is. And so I always figure, well, if they're kind of careless here and smashing into stuff quite a bit, then how is the maintenance in this machine? So you got to do it. So I just go to town and I get her done. But anyway, you just have to be careful when you're swinging them machines. I don't know why that's like a battering ram, but she's beat up. And I went around yesterday and I pressure washed underneath this machine so far, as much as I could, till the real warm weather gets here, but we got a nice warm spell right now. So I'm going to paint the undercarriage of this machine, put her back to that Kubota gray, and I'm also going to paint this counterweight too. I just want to clean this machine up a little bit, and this is all going to get painted right here, and it won't take long to paint this. Just a clean up and a quick coating of paint and you're done. Also, I pulled the floorboards out of it. I pulled that floorboard out of it, and mats are all out. I cleaned them all out and got the floor and the interior cleaned up a little bit. So it's coming along good. I got it cleaned up as best as I could for now, vacuumed out. It was quite dirty inside. So that's what I've been working on steady. So what I put in that machine too for oil in there, and I like that oil. I usually run Rotella, but I like the Chevron stuff there too, right there. I put in there 1540, that Dello Chevron 400, right there, heavy duty engine oil. But here's something else that I do Not all the time, but when I got the oil, I do it. Chevron also puts out a 10W30 heavy diesel oil too, right there. Again, 400 series XLE, and this is a syn blend, which is just that combination, it's just a middle classification of oil between synthetic and conventional. Just another class of oil to broaden their spectrum of sales, I'm sure. But anyway, 10W30 heavy duty diesel engine oil, and this oil has always got good reviews. A Chevron syn blend, and I'll run this 10W30 in my track loader, in my tractor, and all that in the wintertime. And it specs out good, and I think it's a hell of a good oil. Between Shell Rotella and this Chevron Dello, I think you got two really good oils. But anyway, lighter weight oil for wintertime, and there's nothing wrong with running 10W30 in your diesel, man. They run these on on-truck highway tractors, and you know what, pulling 80,000 pounds down the road, so if it's good enough for those guys to rip and tear, it's good enough here. So that's what I run in the winter time, and a lot of my equipment is the 10W30 Chevron Dello and heavy duty oil. Pretty good syn blend, and it specs out. It gives you all the specs, and it meets all the specs, man, for heavy duty diesel oil. The job this morning at hand here, I'm going to carry on with working on this, and you look outside. I'm out here giving her because, you know what, spring has finally kind of sprung. We've lost the snow. The snow's leaving anyway. And she's warmed up. Yesterday, I think it was about 7 or 8 degrees Fahrenheit, Celsius. So, look, even the attachments and equipment are kind of unthawing their way out of a winter freeze right there. So anyway, that's what we're working on today. I got to get that pilot pressure filter out of there, and it doesn't look like it's going to be too easy, but I'll get it out. And because the best thing you can do is when you buy somebody else's used heavy equipment, you got to get at her and you got to do a service on it, because you don't know what the last guy did. Oh, this is going to be tough. All right. So after much fooling around in that pilot filter, first thing I did, I had to pull the air filter to get in there. So I pulled the cap off the air filter. There's the pilot filter. If you look carefully underneath the air filter, way at the back, that aluminum casting, that small one, that's what we're trying to get at. So I had to pull the air filter. And couldn't get it with an oil filter wrench, too tight. Couldn't get it with this rigid chain wrench, and these are all good for hydraulics, those rigid chain wrenches for filters. Couldn't get it. So we're gonna get it with this Milwaukee, 24 millimeter on the bottom of that. And I could barely get in there, but we'll get it. Because that filter, chances are if it's real hard to get, that's the kind of stuff guys are gonna neglect to get. And they'll just quit. All right, so we're gonna try and get in there. I got her loose, I think. Ooh, that's a nasty one. What a nasty pecker. Okay, one thing you need to remember too, you guys, and it tells you in the manual, and I forgot, before you go pulling any circuit apart on this excavator, You got a pressurized hydraulic tank in there to keep contamination out. So bleed off right there. Bleed off just slightly. It's just slightly pressurized to keep contamination from going in that bulk tank. So you've got to take your main hydraulic tank, loosen the cap off, and you'll hear it, and it's hissing and hissing, and then it'll bleed right off. I forgot to tell you that before you go opening up any circuits in this machine. Okay, and there we have it. Right there. There's your hydraulic pilot filter for your pilot hydraulics on this. That thing's draining. I will show you. All right, so there's your pilot pressure housing for that filter. Still got the 24 millimeters stuck on it right there. That's for your pilot pressure. This machine is not AEH controls. It's not electric over hydraulic, which is even more problematic. Pilot pressure operated hydraulics are by far more responsive for starters, and they're less problematic. You're not depending on electrical nearly as much to run your hydraulics. What this filter does in your pilot hydraulics, it just filters all your pilot oil going to your main valves. All your main valves in here are pilot pressure operated, meaning they got a little tiny auxiliary line smaller than your finger right here. And they in turn pressurize and they shift all your valve bodies on your main spools of your hydraulic system on here versus electrical solenoid operated valves. You've got pilot pressure with these, which is much more responsive and more refined and a lot less things to go wrong. So that pilot pressure that pressurizes your main directional control valves, we'll just say directional control valves to keep it simple. I'm sure there's pilot pressure operated other items on this excavator, but for now we'll talk about directional control valves. And so this job of this filter is to make sure that pilot pressure oil is continuously filtered before it goes to those valves and activates those main valves. So that's all it does. It just keeps your oil clean on your pilot pressure side of your hydraulic cylinder, and all your other oil to all your directional control valves and all your main valves, it's all serviced with all of your other hydraulic filters. And that's how the circuit keeps clean. Pilot valve filter, and then you got your main line return filters to keep your oil clean, and you've got your suction side filter inside your tank to keep your oil clean. All this to keep the hydraulic contamination to a very minimum, and hopefully keep the circuit running for years trouble-free. But this is hard to get at, and maybe even sometimes forgot or neglected because it is a little bit harder to get at, and then you actually have to go through the owner's manual to even know this exists. So, and I've been going through the owner's manual on this because this machine takes a lot of filters. So we got that off. And what I like to do when I get them off, look at the dirt on the threads. You might as well clean everything up. And if you don't have anything handy, WD will loosen it. No problem. And then you can go into a brass or steel brush. And this here stainless steel brush, and you can just clean them threads up. Because it's pretty much imperative when you pull these hydraulic circuits apart, like any hydraulic circuit, you want to keep things as clean as you can. And for reassembly and assembly. And also, if you look carefully, on this pilot pressure casting for the filter, you got an O-ring on there. So when you pull that apart, inspect that O-ring and have a look at that O-ring. And generally, it should be replaced, but I don't have one. Normally, if I had one of these, I would replace it. But if you don't have one, just inspect it. Make sure it's got no rips or tears. It hasn't been pinched. It hasn't been rolled over when it's been threaded on and ripped. And this one looks good. But realistically, it should be changed when you change that filter. And then clean the inside as best as you can. When it comes to hydraulics, you know what? Cleanliness is next to godliness, man. That's for sure when you open up a circuit. Okay. So there you go. It's clean, pretty much clean on the outside, and it's clean right on the inside too, as best as you can. Just do your best, that's all you can do. We're not looking for perfection. And then all the Kubota filters come wrapped in plastic, generally, when it comes to small ones like this anyway. So there you go. There's a brand new pilot pressure filter right there, and that's Kubota. And there it does. It just sets in there after it slides on the stem on the oil filter housing. This will slide on first on the stem, and then the body goes right over top, and you carry on. And that's all there is to that. So we'll put it together. That's actually more difficult just getting it out. Oh yeah, one other thing I forgot to mention. When you're putting these filters in, or when you're putting this canister back in, give each one of these O-rings a little bit of oil inside. Just give them a wipe of oil on the outside, so when you're threading this cap in there, you don't get any interference between that housing and this O-ring by the O-ring grabbing the dry steel. So oil it up on this O-ring a little bit, and you'll see inside here, there's an O-ring in this filter. Give that a little bit of oil. I forgot to mention that. And it doesn't really matter what kind of oil, preferably your hydraulic oil, but nobody cares. Just give it some oil. So just give her a little dabble of oil around that O-ring, right there, when you screw it back in. Clean oil right inside there. Give it a little dabble, and there you go. And you're good to go. All right, so let's give this a go and see where we end up. Okay. Yeah, and you don't really want to hammer that housing on there like I did with the impact gun and hit the impact portion. You just want to spin it up with the gun. That was a little bit excessive. But anyway, It's looking good. I'm taking it back off, and I'll show you why. I don't like that impact one. I took it back off for a second, because with that impact gun vibrating, screwing it up inside, I was afraid the filter was going to drop off the stem. I don't know if that's possible, and then you crush the filter as you screw the outer housing up inside. The filter may not be seated properly and it may crush going up, but I don't think I had any effect on it there. And as always, my 24mm dropped deep in the hole. And there we have it. All right, and because that's an O-ring seal on that outer housing, you don't have to go insanely tight. We're not talking about a national pipe tap here where you got to tighten it right up and crank it tight. That's an O-ring fitting. Take it up and snug it up, tighten it up, but not excessive. It's just an O-ring that's doing your sealing. You don't have to get ridiculous. So now it's seated, I can feel it, and that's it. You crank it up, and there you go. You just go until you feel resistance right there on that outer pilot housing, until it stops, and then you just give it a little bit of a crank, and that's all you need to seat that O-ring and keep everything from leaking right there. And that is your pilot pressure filter for your 80 hydraulics. That one there is a bit of a pain in the ass to get in and out, but you know what? Take the time and change that, because that filter, like any other filter, is pretty important. But I would say that pilot pressure filter is very important, because I don't know what micron that filter is, but that thing's there to filter out that particulate, that very fine particulate, to those pilot pressure, to those main valves. So you want to keep that circuit as clean as you can. So keep that pilot pressure oil clean, which in turn will keep your main spools clean and everything else in that system. Take the time and change that pilot filter on that thing. That's very important. Now we'll carry on with something else. All right, so let's put that air filter back in. All right. First things first in your Kubota, right there. And that fits in there snug, right there. Double filtration on this primary and secondary filter. All right, so there's your first filter. And then, right there, all new filters, in they go. Set them in, push them in till they go snug, and you can feel them. And that way you got it sealed all the way around. Like I said, if you buy a piece of equipment, if in doubt, doesn't matter what you buy, spend the money. And luckily I didn't have to. This one come with filters, but the point is, spend the money on the filters and change them all. And also, the debris catch on the bottom, to empty this filter cap, this always goes to the bottom. That way anything that gets trapped in here falls to the bottom, and you can open this up and empty it out. As far as dust and dirt. Okay, and there you have it. Air filter's back in, and got the pilot filter in. Everything's good there. All right, so your recommended oils and that. As with most Kubota motors, it doesn't matter. Any diesel Kubota motor, if you look in here, there's your recommended oil. 10W30 and 1540. Forget the SAE30 and SAE20 pretty much for the area we're in. SAE 1030 and 1540 are the premier oils really for those motors. And they love 10W30 in the winter, I know that. And they'll also start easy on cold starts with 1030 versus 1540. So that's what it says there for your oils. And look at, here's something else. Every 500 service hour, every 500 hours, you change your engine oil. I go, wow. I would never go 500 hours on a service interval. That's just me. It says change the engine oil every 500 hours or once a year, basically is what they're saying. 500 hours seems excessive, because the oil that came out of there was just so smoking black. And I don't know if that's because of the DPF on that thing causing that oil to blacken up sooner, carbon up, whatever. But I just know 500 hours, especially on a DPF machine, I don't know. They're saying, yeah, and I mean, they know their stuff, Kubota, but I find that extremely hard to believe that you can run that diesel engine oil at 500 hours. But I guess under hot running conditions where that motor is running optimum and it's working and the ambient temperature's right and it always gets up to temperature, I guess 500 hours is okay. I'm not going to do it. In fact, I would probably change that oil at the most half of that, 250 hours. In fact, I change oil at every 100, but if it says 500, I'm going to cut that right in half to 250. All right, and one other thing I do, when I'm working on a piece of machinery or something new rolls in here, whatever, and I'm doing it, I write down all the Kubota oil filter numbers, so I don't have to screw around if I got to call it in from home, and if they have one, I know what I got. So what I do is I just take it, and I've got a lot of my filter numbers in here for 5.9s Cummins. You can see the L2501 Suzuki King Quad. I had my John Deere zero turn. I had that down home. It's gone. And all my filters and everything I keep in a book. Yamaha TW200. And I just keep track of all my filters and the numbers. Oh, and one other thing I just noticed. Have a look at that. Kubota filter right there. Made in China. Right there. No more made in Japan. Made in China. Yeah, everybody's chasing the cheap labor, man. But that's how the world is. So that's your canister filter right there. That is your that's your return line filter back to tank. And this is your pilot pressure filter. So everything gets documented, and that way we don't have to screw around. And this is your water fuel separator element right there. Oh, and if you look, here's a good one. Made in Japan. That one's made in Japan. I didn't really pay any attention to that. Oh, and look at this one here. Made in Philippines. So we've got China, the Philippines, and Japan. I have no idea why they would source them out all over like that. Why the hell not just keep your people working and make them all in Japan and just stick with that? Okay, so there you go. We use the filters, we document them down in a book, and then that way we got them. And of course, I actually had to break out the owner's manual too on that machine that come with the machine, because you know what? That thing's got so many filters on, and I've never worked in the 80s, so I have no idea how many filters or where they were or any of them, for some of those little mystery ones anyway. Okay, so thanks for tuning in, you guys, on this video, working on this KX 080, and I'm going to continue working on it a bit. I'll do another video and it might be right soon, who knows. But another thing I have to check on this machine, and I'll go to the owner's manual, which is important, is track tension. And I looked at track tension already, and they talk about 1.6 to 2.2 inches of deflection from your bottom rollers on them steel tracks. So your whole row of rollers on the bottom, that track can only sag from that roller to the track about 2 inches, about there. 2 inches of deflection on there. 1.6 to 2.2, so I'm going to always strive for 2 inches of deflection on that track. So we'll go from there, and I'll open that up, and I'll show you how to do a track deflection check, and we'll tighten up those tracks and make sure they're right. Because the last thing I want to do is roll a steel track off, 24-inch steel pad track off that machine out in the bush. Okay, thanks. Talk to you later. Bye.